So, one small package. I do have some non-anime stuff. This is basically, there's been talks about maybe some sort of Christmas-related multiple movie parties in the DVD collection subreddit. These were, well, Christmas Story and the Jim Carrey How the Grinch Stole Christmas were there. But of course, if I'm going to get this one, I'm going to get this one as well. Since they both have their own selling points, it's kind of nice to have them both. But otherwise, we just have the handful of things this week. Just simple release, but crazy. So, I guess these are all re-releases in that this is, of course, the first Blu-ray release of Cardcaptor Sakura the movie. This is Hidamari Sketch Season 3 on Blu-ray, and this is Natsuyuki Rendezvous, I think is how that's pronounced. Whatever. I've never tried to spell it before now that I think about it. This is annoying. Because normally I use this to open it, but this DVD seems to have that sealed off. What I mean is, if I take the tape off, then I have to pop this open in order to open it. So it's a pretty simple interior, but I wouldn't expect anything too complicated for this. This one says audio in Japanese, and then there's English subtitles down there. I'm mostly just taking a peek to see if this says anything about a different dub, but it doesn't, so I think I was correct in my initial assumption to get this on Blu-ray, but not the DVD re-release, since I do have the old DVD release of the first Cardcaptor Sakura movie. Although I will have to take a peek at it to make certain for sure. For Hidamari's Sketch, we have Hidamari's Sketch Season 3. Hoshimittsu Hidamari Sketch. 12 episodes plus 2 OVAs. Region A. Does this one say what region? It says Region A right there. So this says Region A, Japanese. That's about to be expected. Then we've got our final one here. Let's see. I'm also trying to take a look off to the side, because I'm trying to figure out what I'm about to talk about. The side. So this is Region A only, 11 episodes on one disc. It's not a big update this week. It's probably for the best. So I guess it just leaves the stuff. So let's see. I think I mentioned last time I maybe started watching Zombieland. I probably didn't finish it. 28. I guess maybe I did. I did wait until I finished Zombieland. And so after I recorded the last anime DVD collection update, I prioritized the watching of Helsing Ultimate episodes 9 and 10. And I actually like where it went and how it ended. I mean, it was quite surprising because with episode 8, that one was pretty damn epic and was obviously not an ending to the series, but I was wondering how it could really top itself after that, and I thought I did a pretty good job of continuing on from there, essentially, and ending the anime. Yeah, feels pretty over, and I guess nothing else to really say there, just because I can't really think of how I would do so without talking about the details and potentially spoiling it. And so I watched Blessing of the Campanella, and the character designs are good, but it's... Well, the problem is, the first minute or so of it seems like it could be interesting, but then it essentially turns into one of those anime where you have a character who will make people happy, and that's what it tells us. It's like, oh, that's kind of sweet, and then she ends up, you know, the people she decides she'll make whoever happy that she happens to see when she wakes up. And then, of course, the people she sees when she wakes up just happen to already be the happiest people in the world, who are the most competent at everything, even though there's nothing particularly super demonstrated about anything they do. And so it was basically, it was kind of lacking in conflict. It kind of peaked up every once in a while, kind of, but not really. It never really felt like there was any real conflict to the anime, except for we need this, and then we need to ignore the fact that we just established that this one person is a murderer, and I'll be la 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 happy, and then conclusion at the end of the series. So outside of that, I have to say that I was actually a bit disappointed in it. Again, the character designs were really nice. I was kind of hoping to put it on and watch something medievalish, even if it wasn't going to be spectacular. Try and do something, but I don't know. It ended up being one of those anime, and I guess the reason I don't like them is because when it's an anime where our main group of characters are pretty much the only notable characters in the entire city, because everybody else are a bunch of nobodies, I kind of feel like it's downplaying just kind of the role that average everyday people do have in terms of building a community. I mean, when you go to McDonald's, it can be really easy to overlook the fact that the people working behind the counters are people with their own interests and stuff, because you just kind of, there's kind of this pressure in society to think of them lesser extensively, or I guess the reason maybe we try and think that is so that people are encouraged to try better, but at the same time, sometimes it's not easy to be upwardly mobile as the pressure would imply. It'd be kind of like your parents saying, oh, why don't you get a girlfriend? Why don't you have a girlfriend? We want grandchildren. And you're like, I can't, because nobody I talk to is somebody who I say, oh, I definitely want more of this person in the world. You know, you can't just say, oh, I want this to happen, and then for the right person just kind of magically be out there. So I kind of feel like this kind of anime almost paints over that kind of person unintentionally. It's like the butcher probably has to be making a living, and instead he's worried about where his cat is, and then, oh, I receive the cat, I'm going to give you this cut of meat that's ridiculously awesome, just because they need to somehow make everything in the one episode come together at the end. So not necessarily bad, but in my opinion, I just kind of feel like it overlooks some of the more interesting everyday people of the world, and in favor of trying to make us think of these people as spectacular protagonists when they're not. I mean, it's not even like having the weak protagonist thing. It's something very different from that. So I don't know. And then let's see. I'm trying to think of all I've watched. There is definitely an issue where I have rewatched the first 3 episodes of Gargantia, the Gargantia, because I really like the way that series just starts. That's a very interesting one. Just, there's a lot of elements at play that just make it really neat. But yeah, other than that, I've started watching Flowers of Evil, and it was really interesting. I'm only 7. I finished the 7th episode, and if you watch it, you might know what that means. It's kind of the halfway point. I wasn't quite sure what to think of it. I was thinking kind of more horror-ish, and this one is actually maybe a bit more dramatic than horror-ish. I mean, there's this element of the Flowers of Evil being, I think, a conceptual thing that sprouts in people's minds, I think. I mean, if you watch the first episode, that's pretty much the impression you're given So I don't think I'm really spoiling anything to say that the anime seems to be like that, but it's about these relationship dynamics that are being formed by simultaneously being being essentially kids who are a good way into puberty. I think they're either in late middle school or they look like they should be in high school, but I think they mentioned something about being middle schoolers. Like the main character might have mentioned it. So it doesn't really matter there because as long as you think around the boundary there, I think you kind of got the right idea because it's playing off of some of the awkwardness related to that, except from the point of view of making bad decisions, or more specifically, just how one bad decision just kind of keeps getting worse. Kind of, I think. I'm saying that, I'm describing it that way because there's a feeling of that, but I don't think that exactly says what it's conveying. Again, because I'm just past the halfway point, and something major did happen, but I don't want to say what, and I don't want to use that to influence my analysis of the series from the beginning. So the other interesting thing watching this is this series is very, very clearly rotoscoped. Now, if you're not familiar with the process of rotoscoping, I'm not terribly familiar with the process myself, but my understanding is the idea is you record something on film and then you project it one frame at a time so that somebody can draw it. And then you have good rotoscoping and then bad rotoscoping, and this one is kind of strange. So to talk about some examples of good rotoscoping, it's very possible this is something that Disney came up with because they came up with a lot of animation techniques and whatnot. Now, if they did, they definitely used it in early movies such as Snow White and Sleeping Beauty. And those are Snow White, maybe not as clear, but definitely with Sleeping Beauty, that's a good example of some really good rotoscoping where it may not be obvious that they had a dancing actress off this on a camera, and then they were drawing Aurora over the dancing character essentially, so that she would move and flow just right. And then you got examples of some bad ones, and I think there's an old 70s animation called Wizards that's maybe a good example of that, where the purpose of that is basically to just take war film sort of stuff, and instead of Nazis, you have demons and winged demons or horned demons or whatnot drawn in place of them, as opposed to just having everything being the default animation style. The idea being that, I don't know, you can just tell that they basically are drawing really quick black splotches onto film to make a very rough animation that is very strange animation, but you can kind of see from there the purpose of rotoscoping is, I guess it changes depending on the circumstance. And so I was watching this anime thinking most of this seems to just be live action with stuff drawn over it. So then why did they draw over it? What advantage did they get from doing that? And I'm wondering if there could be an element of it where the faces are maybe being somewhat more emphasized through the rotoscoping process, and that could be an interesting explanation for why they went through with it, even though everything may very well just be a simple film scene with animation being turned into animation frame by frame. I don't know that it's exactly that, but I've noticed there's just subtle little things where, like, they will intentionally show character really still, just unnatural still, where a person in real life who is trying to act the part may be shuffling a bit, especially if they look younger, but if you just have them still, then it just adds a much colder element to their stare, which makes it a bit chilling, and I think little things like that are there. I know, like, Psyche, I guess I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I know, like, I look at her face, and I think it's kind of creepy how it's just always this real huge smile. It just feels kind of fake, and I'm not sure if that's intentional, because the character herself hasn't shown anything that would make it seem fake, but it definitely makes it feel a little out of this world. It could be the rotoscoping that does it. It's hard to say for certain, but it's an interesting thing, and the reason I'm bringing it up so much is because in the case of this anime, it makes a lot of sense to kind of talk about it, because rotoscoping makes sense from the point of view of you're either trying to get a very accurateness to your animation that would be hard to do freehand, or you're trying to do something that you could in theory easily do with film, but you want to go slightly beyond that so that there's less of disjoint. Like, for example, I mentioned wizards, and you have all the Nazis that were drawn over with demons and stuff, you know, just shadowed forms. But the idea I'm hinting at is, if you tried to have them be people in costumes, that could be expensive. If you just did something simple like had them have foam horns on or something, maybe that'd be obvious and not expensive. But when you just draw over them and you make something with horns and wings, then maybe you reach a kind of balance point where, even though you know what they did in order to do the process, you get the idea right without being too distracted by having to laugh at them, because honestly it doesn't seem like a particularly quick process to me. But I don't do a lot of drawing myself, so it's hard to say for certain. And I bring this up because there's this element of the advantage of animation being the ability to express things, other worlds or ideas or concepts more fluidly than if you were trying to use just film. And you kind of see this a lot with films nowadays because of all the CGI in films. And CGI is essentially a form of animation that attempts to look hyper-realistic, and you're seeing a lot of blending of filming and CGI techniques in order to try and make it not as obvious, but people are still looking to make movies that conceptually would be impossible to make without some sort of huge special effects budget, or you can just make an entire world CGI. And so I have a little respect for that, even if sometimes it doesn't always work out exactly like it should. But, you know, that's the advantage of animation in general, is just this ability to express these concepts like that. And so if you take film and you rotoscope over it, you kind of expect at least a wizard's approach where you're trying to make something less realistic. But everything about the Flowers of Evil has been just a real-life drama sort of thing. And I think that makes it kind of interesting to talk about in terms of the use and the value of rotoscope, because I feel like the anime is using it in a very boring way, but because it's doing that, it's a very interesting way. And then the anime itself is not boring in its own. It's just that the rotoscoping is just not particularly exciting. It's the kind of thing where you look at it and sometimes you wonder, why is this animated? I don't know, maybe I'm a bit long-winded about that part, but I'm in the middle of watching it, and I've been having these thoughts, because this is a nice, thought-provoking approach to animating it. Even if it's something that I would prefer they not do, it's still pretty notable. But that said, that's not a whole lot of anime I know. Not a whole lot of watching. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that. One of those is definitely Super Smash Brothers. And then I guess it's another thing I bought recently is another copy of Super Smash Brothers, because I do have the older 3DS. And I know people ask questions about why I have multiple 2DSs, or not 2DSs, but DSs, and the question of multiple 3DSs may be there, but it makes a lot more sense, because this was a launch one. It was, yeah, basically a launch one from the very first week, maybe even the very first day. And as you can see, the 3DS XL is much larger, and it's much nicer for playing games and seeing what you're doing. But since these were like $100 more expensive at the time, Nintendo, when they did the price drop, had all the 3DSs that were purchased at that time enter something called the Ambassador Program, which basically means they get a handful of free downloadable virtual console titles Nothing terribly spectacular, but at the same time, that means that this is actually a pretty neat 3DS to have on hand. And so I've always kept 2. I was always planning to keep 2. It's just, I began thinking, okay, I've only got 2 challenges left in here. And at this point, those 2 challenges are get the remaining headgear, which is a really big pain in the ass because you wrestle with the random number generator, and play multiplayer for 50 hours. So at that point, it's like, okay, it would be nice to have 2 copies of Super Smash Bros. So that if I have a guest come over, if they don't have the 3DS and or Super Smash Bros., here you go. I stayed up a couple of hours one night and just, bam, unlocked all the characters and all at one stage, because the Flat Zone 2 requires you to unlock the second challenge panel, and I don't like using hammers, so it took me a little while before the random number generator gave me the 3 outfits I needed to unlock that stuff. But there you go, a lot of Super Smash Bros. Stuff. I mean, this basically means that I played through the game. I played through classic mode with each character enough time to make sure they all have all their custom moves. I've gotten all the outfits. I still need to get all the headgear to get that one. I did not mention trophies, and I think I only have like 9 or 10 left to go. 3 of those are going to be from the challenge panel stuff, of course. So the game needs to start giving me headgear, because I still need 10 of those. I don't know the best way to get them. Other than that, I probably mentioned last week that I played a little Bayonetta. I haven't played any more of it, but I did notice that JonTron did really like the final battle of Bayonetta, and of course a lot of people on Reddit in one topic did say pretty good things about it. Although not specific things, but it just means that, like I speculated last week, I definitely need to give it more of a chance. I think it just started off kind of rough, and but we'll have to see how that happens, because I still want to unlock Smash stuff, and I may have to fire up Mario Kart 8 in a week or 2 when the DLC comes out, and I have new tracks that I need to make sure I'm so good at that my brothers don't bother trying racing against me. Oh well. I think that covers just about everything. It feels like a bit of a crazy update, but oh well. Again, I'm going to be uploading these videos all at once when a certain condition is met, and I'm waiting for that condition still, so I guess y'all have a nice week, and of course there will be another video posted after this one, of course.